here and get to know our candidates just a little bit better. I would like to thank the people who put this together: Martha, Susanna, Debbie, Nancy, Carol, Adam, Barb, Joe, and Sue. Thank you very much. This is a lot of work to put together. So I would like to say to our candidates, relax, because the only answer that's a wrong answer is one that's not representing you personally. You know, we want to get to know you, and the more authentic you are, the better off you will present yourself in front of this group of people. To the audience, I would like to say, feel free to clap and cheer if you hear something that you are particularly enthusiastic about. If you hear something that you really don't agree with or you don't like, please just do a thumbs down, but no booing. So we are, and also if you have a cell phone, if you would please turn it off now. Okay, so my husband, Mike, right here in the front row, is going to be our timekeeper, and he will hold up the yellow card when you have 30 seconds left and the red card when you are done. We are not going to shut you off at the end in the middle of a sentence, but please do not carry on too much longer when you see that red card. So we're going to go ahead and get started here with the first question, which is, how do you plan to take on Jim Jordan? And we are going to have to do a coin toss to figure out who's going to answer that first. Who's got a coin? Well, okay, if Shannon goes first, then you get to go. You get to decide whether you're going to go first or last at the end.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, all right, there you go.
So the question was, how do you plan to take on Jim Jordan? Currently, I'm building a national campaign. I've learned a lot from watching Janet's campaign, where it sort of scaled nationally late. So I've been able to take that and sort of scale the campaign nationally. I've hired a really good team of a digital team, a good fundraising team. This week alone, I've gotten almost 900 new contributors from all 50 states, I think. I've gained about 10,000 Twitter followers just this week. And so we're building sort of a critical mass to be able to fight this. This is a national campaign. Everybody hates him, and he affects everyone. Like, honestly, people who are like the nicest, sweetest nuns are like, no, you have to beat him. Like, he's awful, you have to beat him. And so there's a critical mass, and if you can find the message, which is pretty easy because he's awful. So that's sort of where we're focused right now, is just sort of building the infrastructure so that we can go and hit all of the different points every time he does something new that's egregious and awful. We can have a rapid response, and we can make sure that we're building on that. The reason that this last week was such a good time for my campaign was because I was able to hit, as he was lying on ABC's This Week, people were like, how is this happening? And I was like, hi, I'm here, we're fighting him. And people, have really, really sort of gelled onto the campaign and to the fight. And that would be the most, I think that's the way you do it.
Okay, Jeff.
Well, I think the way we're going to beat Jim Jordan, we have to take the fight to him, and we have to hit back at him hard. The lying has to stop. We catch him in lies all the time. He thinks that what the president said about going to China to get dirt on Joe Biden was a joke. That is an insult to every American here. So what I plan to do is we need to get out and touch everybody in the rural communities. We need to touch every community or every county within this district, and we need to get out the vote. Traditionally, it's been about 35%, and we're not going to beat Jim Jordan with 35% of the vote. So we have to reach out to young Democrats, which are college students and things like that. We have to get out, and we have to, I hate to say it, convince the farmers that the Republican Party is no longer your friend. To do that, we have to get out in the rural communities. And if we do that, combined with the young vote, I think we can reach that 18% that we need. So that's my plan of getting out there, talking to the people, and convincing them that the Republican Party is no longer your friend. Thanks.
Okay, so we're gonna just go back and forth. So you took the first question first, so I'm gonna give the next question. You're gonna have first crack at it. And how will you campaign throughout the district's varied communities and areas?
Well, obviously one of the things that's big nowadays is social media. Either Facebook, websites, Twitter accounts, Instagram, things like that. For the young folks, it's Snapchat, which my daughter knows more about it than I do. So that's one thing, but you have to get out there to the rural communities, set up events, talk to the people. You have to talk to the people. And Jim Jordan does not do that. Jim Jordan sneaks in the back door in counties, and especially in Allen County, we don't even know he's there. So he sneaks in, sneaks out. Sometimes he cancels events like he did in Norwalk just this past week. But we have to get to the communities. Yes, it's going to take a lot of effort, but we have to have surrogates out there that's going to pitch your plan and talk to the people. That's the key to this. Talk to the people.
All right, thank you.
Well, I kind of disagree with the idea that we have varied communities. We have people who have different views, but there's a commonality of all of us. You know, we're all Ohioans. We're all, we all want fairness, we all want justice. You know, whether it be, you know, the kids who are LGBTQ in rural areas who are being bullied, or, you know, the elderly who are suffering from having their prescription drugs almost unavailable because they don't have the money for them. There's a commonality that we need to get back to. And I think that we do that. We do that obviously by having events and things like that, but we do that by just making sure that all of our groups are together. You know, building coalitions is the key to all of this. If we keep everyone segmented out, they're only going to support their own needs. They're not going to see themselves as being necessary to the support of someone else. And they're not going to see how that group is necessary to them. Building the coalition is the most important thing we can do.
All right. Okay, so we're going to go back to you. What is your plan for fundraising?
Yes, Jim Jordan, as of the end of June, his report was, he had $1,070,000 cash on hand. The new report's due the middle of next week, which will probably be, I'm guessing, maybe 1.3 million. As I said, I've built an aggressive fundraising team. We started digital advertising this week. I've gotten almost 900 new contributors this week. I'm building a list. I haven't actually started doing call times, which is where you actually dial for dollars, which starts next week. And we've got a scaled list of people who are really, really contributors to the Democratic Party, and they believe. And I've gotten a lot of donors who aren't really political, but they can't stand Jordan. One of my favorite donors that I've gotten so far is they donated $1.63. And and that's how much they had. That's that they wanted to be a part of it. And everyone wants to be a part of this. So, if you max out at $2,800 or you donate $1.63, you treat everyone with respect. But and this woman who donated the $1.63 may have $20 next time or whatever. So you want to make sure that everyone feels a part of it, because it's a fight that we're all in together.
All right, thank you. Jeff?
Of course, we're going to start with going out nationally. Like Shannon said, everybody hates Jim Jordan. So there are other people in other states that are going to help with this campaign. So we need to reach out nationally first, and then we're going to come back to Ohio inside the district or inside Ohio, because I've heard people all over Ohio say they want to help. So of course, the dialing for dollars is one of the key things that every politician has to do. When you get elected, you're still dialing for dollars. It's all about the almighty dollar to put out yard signs and all that stuff. So we're going to do dialing for dollars. Talk to the people. My message is gonna be, we have to talk to the people. If I come up to somebody and I strike a note with them, they're gonna wanna give me some donations, whether it be $5. My sister only gave me $5. So, you know, so it's more of a grassroots. I mean, everybody cannot afford to give everything. I just had somebody on my Facebook page say, I wish I could support you. I told her, just vote for me if you live in the district. So, I mean, that's the way we're going to do nationally first, and then we're going to bring it back into Ohio, and then within the district.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're starting with you with this question. If you don't win the Democratic nomination, will you support the winner of the primary?
We all have to show a united front. So if I lose the primary, so be it. The people have spoken. I will support whoever wins the primary because we have to beat Jim Jordan. So I hope I win. But again, it's a united front. We can't have infighting within the party like we see sometimes on national television. So yes, I will support the eventual winner.
All right.
Yes,
Shannon?
of course. And that requires an extensive interview. The answer is just yes.
All right. Vote blue no matter who, right? Okay.
Anyone
thank
but
you.
Jim Jordan.
All right. So Shannon, we're starting with you
Okay.
first on this question. How do you intend to fix our broken healthcare system?
Okay, one person isn't going to fix the healthcare system, but you need people who support fighting for it. I mean, we have our representative right now actively is trying to destroy our healthcare system. We all know it. Kevin McCarthy and Jordan have both promised that if they take back the House in 2020, the first thing that they're going to do is try to repeal and not replace Obamacare again. I believe that the Democratic Party's, the House has put together a plan, which is basically protecting what we have now, which is, if you get nothing out of today, understand there is a much bigger threat to losing what we have now than there is to gaining anything. There's a court case that's on the Court of Appeals, which is basically to eradicate everything in Obamacare. That means pre-existing conditions come back. That means if your child is 25, they can't be on your insurance anymore. That means that caps for lifetime bans are eliminated again. So what we need to do is elect everyone up and down the ballot who supports healthcare, who wants to protect it. 90-something% of the population supports making sure that we have safe healthcare. Unfortunately, there's a myriad of people who don't, and they all reside in the House Republican caucus. And that's where we are. So for me, I want to make sure that we strengthen the ACA. We have a public option where people can buy in if they need to. Like, I am about to lose my health insurance because I had to switch jobs. So this is a very personal issue to me, and I'm sure to everyone else in the room. Everyone has healthcare challenges, or they know someone who does. So that's where we need to focus.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Jeff?
Well, my number one thing about coming out and running was the ACA. So we have to protect the ACA no matter what. We are all humans. The law is flawed. We all know this. The key to this is keep moving and improving it until we get to a system that is good for all Americans. Whether that is universal health care or a ACA with a public option. But the key is, and I'm not smart enough to figure this out, so I'm going to have to bring in everybody I know and can run into to explain it, to work with it, whether I reach across that aisle or not. We have to figure out how to move it forward. We just can't replace it. We can't repeal it. There's too many Americans on the system now that if you dropped it, people will die, including my brother. So this system cannot go away. It has to be improved on, and we have to work together to improve it.
Okay, so the next question is actually delving into this a little bit deeper. What are your views on single payer, public option, or our current private insurance model?
have to talk to different Americans. You can't do away with private health care. Basically, it's kind of un-American in my eyes. But again, we need to move the needle. And I don't care if it's single payer, universal health care, as long as Americans are covered. The biggest cause of bankruptcies in America is medical bills. So we have to have coverage to protect people, to protect their homes, protect their families. So I am for a combination of government healthcare and private.
Shannon?
I've spent my entire, since I was a freshman in college working on healthcare reform. I was there, I worked for Senator Kennedy's Labor Committee while they were doing Hillary Care. So I've basically been living this for 25 years or so. But what I know is universal coverage is absolutely necessary. It protects everyone. And I include, and this is where it gets a little controversial, but I include undocumented Americans as well, because they, if you're undocumented and you're working in the food service industry, for example, and you get sick, the potential, if you can't go to a doctor to get antibiotics, you've potentially made everyone else sick who has that food. We're all in this together. Health is what sort of unites us, So what I want to make sure of is that we have a system that ACA, we can't get rid of private insurance simply because there's 2.8 million people in private insurance and what happens to those jobs and those incomes and those people's lives. I sort of believe that the Canadian system is potentially a very good system, which is that it's a public, single payer. The government pays for the majority of it, and then you have a supplemental coverage for different things. But it's run by private insurance. Each province, which is basically a state in Canada, runs their own coverage, and you have a defined list of benefits, which is massively expansive. As long as the doctor allows for it, it gets covered. Ambulances and things like that, prescription drugs are not actually covered. So I think that system works the best because it does offer universal coverage. Everyone has the right to go to a hospital, to go to a doctor, to go to urgent care. And then it's paid for by the government, and it eliminates costs significantly.
What will you do to save rural hospitals at a time that the need has never been greater?
Okay, and this is a really important issue, which a lot of people in Washington are starting to work on, because there's a lot of, it's where there's a lot of, the ability to have a lot of bipartisan support, because a lot of Republicans are in rural areas. And a lot of them understand that these are their communities. These are the communities that they live in. I have a friend of mine who was elected to Congress in the last cycle, who's a Democrat, who's doing a lot of work on rural. And so it's where you have to, this is where you have to coalition build the most. Because a lot of liberal Democrats aren't in districts that have these issues. So you do have to be able to work across the lines. Now, we know that one of the ways that we can do this is strengthening Medicare, Medicaid, and then strengthening the ACA so that they are not penalized for the costs that are associated with rural health care, which are massive simply because they don't have access in the same way to like level 1 trauma centers, so they have to bring in people. And so it's more of a coalition that needs to be built around it. So I can answer that. What I would do personally is I would work with a coalition that I think best can get us what we need to do to protect rural health.
All right, thank you.
So if you think about rural hospitals, they're away from everything. So let's just think about first responders and the time it takes to get somewhere. And if you consolidate these rural hospitals away from certain communities, that's already happening. ProMedica, MedMutual, all those are consolidating hospitals. That in itself puts the public in danger because the response times are greater. So people can still die waiting for an ambulance to get there from outside the area. You can also think about it as the economics, as you consolidate into more one system, whether it be ProMedica or MedMutual, then prices will increase. And I guarantee you prices will increase, because that's what happens when you have monopolies. There's no unchecked system, there's no system to check the prices, you know. Now we can get things like how much it's gonna cost, like $180 that I just paid to have my blood drawn. You know, those things are gonna come out when you start consolidating hospitals. So we need those outlying communities. We need those rural hospitals to A, get to the patient in time, help the community, and not cause, hopefully keep your costs down when you go in for an emergency or whatever it may be.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're starting again with you, Jeff. How would you move us from a sick care model of healthcare to a wellness-based model of healthcare?
I can give you one example. I am a diabetic, okay? I can't do certain things with my insurance because the insurance companies won't allow me. But if they don't allow me, down the road, they're gonna have to pay for like, you know, a heart attack or whatever it may be, new kidneys. So preventative care is the key to everything. The pharmaceutical industry wants us to take those drugs. And who do we have to thank for that industry is the GOP, because they take all their money. We have to get away from that. We have to get back to what the Bible says is God provided all the plants for us. You know, a plant-based diet. For years it was the opposite. They wanted us to eat a lot of meat and everything. So to get away from the wellness, we have to start eating better. We have to start having wellness checks that are paid for, like some of them do. I haven't yet figured out why my doctor bills me for them. But you have to get upfront care to prevent everything that's coming down the road. And that's the key to it. You know, my cardiologist said, Jeff, take this pill and you'll never have to have another heart cath done. It's like, is that really what we want to do? Just medicate ourselves. And that's the key. We can't be medicating ourselves. We have to find a different way. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but we have to find those answers.
I think that what we need to do is, starting as part of a comprehensive early childhood education, is making sure that healthcare, nutrition, and things like that are brought into kids so that they don't develop early childhood diabetes and things like that. So what we need to do is we need to stop thinking of things incrementally and like putting healthcare over here and education over here and the budget over here and taxes over here. Everything we do is interconnected, and that's part of what you would do when you go to a wellness model, is making sure that you integrate wellness into other aspects. For example, when you go join Social Security, you can then join a bunch of gyms for free or at a very reduced rate. Whereas that would be a great thing to do for families as well, who, you know, with your healthcare, they could figure out a way to include working out and things like that, so that it becomes a community activity which you have your whole life. And what I think that we need to do is focus on making sure that preventative care access, and that's part of the ACA, is making sure that wellness care and preventative care, making sure that you have access to the flu shot or vaccines and things like that. All of those things come within the group to sort of make a compact group of healthcare needs. Which is a really bad answer.
All right. I'm sorry.
Which is a really bad answer.
Okay, so here's the rule. You never say anything bad about yourself on stage.
You said be authentic, and it's authentically okay.
All right, okay. I will give you a chance at the next question, okay? So what is your plan for making prescription medications affordable?
I actually support the House Democrats have a plan that they're working on right now. The Congressional Budget Office scored it as saving. One of the things that it allows for is that it allows Medicare to negotiate with drug manufacturers, which they are not presently allowed. They're the only agency who offers drug protections who are not allowed to negotiate prices. According to the CBO, and this study came out either yesterday or the day before, just changing that aspect would bring $345 billion into Medicare. That's how much it would save if they were allowed to negotiate. Right? I absolutely support that. Now there is the other half of that, which is that money will be pulled away from R&D on new drugs. So we need to find a balance in that, but we absolutely need to make it so that people can afford their drugs. It's ridiculous that insulin is so expensive. My grandparents used to have to go, they lived in Michigan, so they drive to Canada. That's not a realistic option for, most of the country. So we know, one of the things that's in the House bill is that requiring proof of why things are being raised. And if they're not, charging them. And, penalty fees for raising prices and skyrocketing. And I absolutely support that point.
All right, thank you.
Well, we're gonna call it what it is. It's greed. Same drugs go to Canada that are here in the United States, but they're like $5 in Canada and they're $50 here. So I agree with the Medicare thing that they're able to come in, they need to come in and negotiate those prices down for Americans. We need to get the lobbyists out of DC for the pharmaceutical industry. That's part of it. But I also know pharmaceutical reps and the amount of money that is going to these reps to talk to doctors, wine and dine them. Why can't we put some of that into R&D? I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that's being paid out of cars, stock options. Let's put that back into R&D, lower our drug prices, and let's get back to the wellness program and get them off the stupid drugs.
All right, thank you. And here's your next question, Jeff. What would you do to ensure that mental health care and substance abuse treatment are available, accessible, and reimbursable at the same level as physical health care?
All of those items, the mental health, all of that stuff should be in our insurance, no matter what. It's part of the well-being of a human being. There's certain aspects that my insurance program doesn't even pay for me, but it needs to be there. We have to have that. We always hear mental health with gun violence. Well, if we have gun violence and it's mental health, then we should be adding it to our insurance program so everybody can get that help that they need. A lot of people can't get it. I know somebody in my life that I'm not going because I can't afford it. Mental health, to see a psychiatrist, to get the help they need. We need these items. We need, my program doesn't pay for gastric bypass surgery. Well, if you look at it back to the questions before, if somebody gets gastric bypass surgery, they have a less likely chance of heart disease, diabetes, which prevents it. So all of these items need to be in our programs, whether it be government sponsored, the ACA, or private. They just need to be there for the wellness of the human being.
Okay, thank you. Shannon?
As part of the ACA, they passed, one of the provisions was something called mental health parity. And it is the law. You're supposed to have everything paid at an equal level for mental health. We don't do it. We absolutely have denied the fact that this is an issue. And we talk about mental health with guns. The problem is that the mass shootings aren't done by the mentally ill. The mentally ill are much more likely to be victims of violence than they are to perpetrate violence. But what we need to do, and everyone in this room knows someone, either they've all suffered, you've suffered mental health issues, or you know someone who has. And what we need to do is be cognizant that if someone has cancer, you treat it, oh my God, what can I do to help? I'll bring you food. But if someone says, I have a mental health crisis, or I'm having mental health issues, we tend to freak and walk away and and let them on their own. And a lot of times it's hard because your brain is turning against you in a way when you're suffering from a mental health crisis. Your brain is telling you that you're not good enough, whatever needs to happen. And so you're not listening to the people around you. So what we need to do is have many, many, many more mental health professionals. We need to make that a target of what we're doing. My Aunt Tony's here today, and my Aunt Tony has spent probably, 30 years as a mental health professional, and she runs 4 counties' suicide prevention program. So we need to talk to experts in this field. We need to make sure that everyone who needs access to mental health care has it in emergency situations, and even if they're just starting to feel, depressed. This is anxiety-inducing for me, and I'm luckily I have a good group of people that I can be like, I'm having a meltdown, and they're like, no, we'll walk you through it, and everybody needs that.
Next question.
Okay.
How would you assure women and girls full access to healthcare, including reproductive services such as contraception and abortion services?
We work to repeal the Hyde Amendment. First and foremost, that has to be repealed. That was a decision that was made for, it's men deciding what should happen to women's bodies. And as a woman, I've gone to the gynecologist, and I've had, and there are sometimes horrible experiences. If you've got a bad doctor and a gynecologist, it's miserable experience. I've also had, I had my appendix almost burst, and the doctor sent me home telling me I had cramps because I was a young woman who was saying, I have pain right there. After they ran 2 vaginal ultrasounds and did 6 pelvic exams. Yeah, it was a good day. That's how I spent my Thanksgiving, my senior year in college. It was fantastic. We need to protect women's health. We're 51% of the population, and we're treated like we're 1%. It's ridiculous. Every woman in this room understands what needs to happen. The men here are like, wait, I don't understand a little bit. And some of you have daughters, and some of you have wives, and you've been through a lot of things. Protecting the right to abortion isn't demanding abortion. It's saying to a woman that you have the right to make the decisions about your body and your life. And sometimes, we talk about late-term abortions and things like that, and sometimes it's necessary to save the life of the mother. It's not that people are like, hey, I've waited this long, let me just do this. It's the way that women are talked about in abortion is that we're stupid and we're always wrong. And I think that we need to stop treating women like they don't know what's going on with their own bodies.
Jeff?
Well, what can I say? I'm a male. So I do believe that the males in Congress and the Senate are clueless about women. We must, my daughter, I have to protect everything for her. My girlfriend, she used Planned Parenthood when she was young because her mother refused to take her to the doctor. So I know the benefits of Planned Parenthood. My sister-in-law, the baby skull did not form. So they had to have access to abortion. These are all things that it's up to the woman. It's not up to me. It's up to the woman. And in the case of rape or incest, it's not up to the male either. It's up to the woman. It's up to the woman to go and say, I need this, and we should give it to them. That's how I feel. That I would introduce bills, I would support bills, anything with women's rights, women's reproductions, all of that. And I'm not just blowing smoke either, because I don't think it's my place to say I'm pro-choice. It's up to you.
I'm just going to stand up and applaud. Okay, so it's your turn, Jeff. We're trying to change subjects here and finally get off of healthcare. Okay. Many in the 4th Congressional District work 1 or more jobs, but do not make enough to live on. As one living wage for your constituents?
Well, number one, I'm gonna kill everything for a right to work. That hurts Americans more than it helps, okay? We need the unions out there to help us, and we see this with GM right now. And I can feel it in where I work because we haven't shipped anything to GM, even though we're supposed to. So any bills that will help promote fair workstations, better wages, because like you said, not only do you work 2 jobs, your family life suffers. So work-family life is in there too. So we have to have that. But we just can't say, we're gonna pay you $15 an hour. There's more to it than just that. Yes, they need more, because I know a company in Lima advertised just recently for $99.50 an hour. It's like, how does somebody live on that? When I ran a company in Lima, we were hiring people for $7. Now that's early 2000s, but how do we, as a conscious of a nation, hold people back and don't allow them to earn a good living, to put food on the table, to have a decent house to live in? A decent house in Lima, Ohio is like $650 a month. You know, take $9 an hour, and what kind of house are you living in? You know, so we have to push legislation. We have to raise minimum wage to a comfortable level. And that starts, like, we've got to do it this year, and we've got to do it now.
All right, thank you.
As someone who has just recently, I've spent a lot of time transitioning from jobs. I moved back to Ohio, and then I've been temping and contracting. And I just took a job as the night auditor at the hotel near my house and I'm making $10.75 an hour. And part of the reason is that is because of the commute. It cut down my commute significantly, so I saved a ton of money in gas, I saved a ton of money in food and things like that. The other reason is because it allows me more flexibility to run this campaign. And the reason I'm doing that is because I have friends who can't find jobs, who can't, or they don't make enough. In Marysville, you can make $13 an hour working at McDonald's, whereas I know people who can't make, in $13 an hour in Marysville isn't a lot of money. But what we need to do is to sponsor legislation that allows for raising the minimum wage, but also raising the cost of, and tying it to a cost of living adjustment. So if we have massive inflation spikes, you can have the minimum wage automatically raised with it. We also need to do things like cut child care credits and things like that. Because a lot of times what happens is if you have kids and you're working, you end up working to pay for the child care and not pay, it doesn't go into your salary, it just goes to pay the child care. We need alternatives, cost-effective ways to have child care, cost-effective ways to have health care, and all of these things. They're all tied together. And so it's not just one piece of legislation, I think, that can solve the problem. It's a myriad of pieces working together.
Thank you. Okay, here's your next question. Many workers are now hired on a temporary basis with no job security and no benefits. What do you intend to, I get it. What do you intend to do to bring these workers better economic opportunities, more stability, and greater job security?
Well, one of the ways that we can do that is we need to restructure that god-awful Republican tax cut plan that just gave money, and they thought, hey, well we'll give them billions of dollars in tax cuts, and they'll just reinvest the money and give money to their employees. We need to restructure the tax code so that if you do stock buybacks so that your profits increase, you get tax extra for that. You don't get celebrated for that. If the money that you bring in, it doesn't go back to your workers, you get penalized for that. We shouldn't have CEOs that are making like 32,000 times what their employees are. Jeff Bezos said the reason he wanted to get into doing private space travel and things like that was because what was he going to do with the money? And I was like, I don't know, It just seemed like a reasonable option there. You've got $150 billion. Pay your employees. And we need to force corporations to do that. The government needs to take back control of making sure that the citizenry is taken care of. And that's what I think where we need to be.
All right, Jeff.
When it comes to job security, I know at my work we have 3 temporary agencies in there along with our associates. We're still short 80 people. 80 people. I think part of the problem with the job security is also work ethics. A lot of the old work ethics are going away. Nowadays, I call them kids, are there for a couple years and go. So I think it's a business's decision what's going on with the temporary workforce, unfortunately. I tell my temporary employees when they come through the door, you are here to get hired. And I think that is an environment that they have to promote. Not that they're gonna be here. I know there's companies out there that string you along for 2 years and out the door you go. And those things have to be addressed. But that's a bigger question. You know, we have to put people to work. Benefits, I know as a temporary employee, I had benefits, but they were $200 a pay period, $400 a month, and I was a temp, only making about $9 an hour. But I had to have it for the little one in the back room. So the answer to that, I think, is a bigger question of how do we get business to buy into direct hiring, and you have a whole host of benefits that you have to pay for with that initial wage in the 40 hours. So I think that's a bigger question.
All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on to another subject. What would you do to make sure that small family farms are sustainable?
You know, I was talking with some Ohio farm guys in Fremont a couple weeks ago. They had talked about co-ops and how co-ops got started. And those things are vital to the family farms. You get a group of people that come together with a like-minded, problem. The consolidation into corporate farms has to stop. There cannot be any more corporate farms. And what we're seeing now with the trade and everything, farm incomes are plummeting, which will lead to bankruptcies, which leads to the corporate farms coming in and gobbling up those family farms. Family farms, they care about their farms. The corporate farms don't care about the farms. The family farms, we have to preserve. We have to, if they need some help, then we need to provide it. Corporation farms, they don't get any help from the government. And I know where to go to find this stuff. So we have to protect the family farm by A, helping them, B, don't start trade wars that cuts our soybeans in half. And that's going to be, let's plant corn next year. So everybody plants corn, the price of corn goes down. We have to get back to the actual free market economy of the market, not having the government regulate what the farmers are going to get paid for. So the family farm is vital to America. It's always been vital to America. It puts food on the world's plate.
All right, thank you, Shannon.
Sam Perdue, who is the Secretary of Agriculture, was basically asked the same question in Wisconsin a few days ago. And his answer was go big or go home, I think. Or it was go big or die or something. Something really, really awful. But basically, currently the administration's position is if you're not a corporate, we don't care. The problem with that is that rural communities are based on small farms. That's what they've been built around. One person, if you look at even as you're driving here, there's, family farms everywhere. They also take care of with climate change. They focus on things like that because it's sustainable. If you're in a large corporate farm, all you're interested in is profits. You don't care about the community, you don't care about what it's doing to the drinking water or the land or anything like that. So what we need to do is build a coalition among Democratic and Republicans who all support small farms. You know, the Republicans who heard Sam Perdue say this were freaked out as well because they understand how awful it is for their own communities. So this is one of those big areas where we can work together across the aisles. And that's what I think is going to save the small farm, is people going, okay, wait, no, you know what? Politics be damned, party be damned. We need to solve this problem for all of our communities. Because farming is such an integral part of American life. From history, it's also a huge economic component. You know, as Jeff referenced, the trade war has cost billions of dollars. Now we're taking out loans from China for a trade war that we're having with China, and China's getting interest on those loans. It's absurd. We need to stop everything that the administration's doing related to agriculture, basically. And I don't know how to do that personally, but I know that we can do it in concert with the Republicans who are equally as freaked out.
All right, thank you. Okay, so what would you do to ensure that farmers have access to world markets?
I mean, our farmers, right now, the trade war, one of the things that's hurting us so much is it's allowing for our main trading partners, China, Japan, and Russia, to find new markets. And we're not gonna get those markets back. Like, that's what's the scariest part. We need to be able to open up our markets and make sure that we're feeding, you know, in Africa, for example, where we can do there's a lot of upward mobility in trade with Africa. And so what we need to do is have a national policy where we focus on developing trade patterns that help our farmers be able to grow and sell globally, and to give them the technology and the development to be able to do that, whether it's setting up trade missions where we take small farmers and who can go to Africa, who can go to Asia, who can go to Central America. And so it's a much more comprehensive than just protecting, you know, than just looking at it from an agricultural perspective. It has to be international trade, it has to be small business. All of those different groups that we have should work together to focus on opening new markets. Because emerging markets are always going to be the most important thing for us.
So ensure farmers, A, get rid of Trump. B, get rid of Jim Jordan. C, stop the trade war. And then we reset it with China. We just can't throw the frog in the boiling water because he'll jump out. So we have to move that needle slowly. Get those trade routes going again so the farms can survive. And then we go to work making sure China pays their fair share. That's what it's about. It's not balls to the walls, let's go get China. We have to get these people out of here so we can save the family farm, plain and simple, because they won't survive another 4 years in Trump or Jordan for 2 years. So.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Jeff, what would be your top priorities in addressing climate change?
A, get rid of Jim Jordan. B, we've known this since the 70s. We have to get away from fossil fuels. It's killing the environment. Thank God for Elon Musk and Tesla. They've been the disruptor that is moving us away from those fossil fuels. We have to get to better solar energy, better costs for solar energy, wind energy. Anything that we can do to get us away from those carbons that go into our air that is killing the environment. We have to do this. There is no question about it. The science is there. Glaciers are melting. Miami drowns every time high tide comes around because the oceans are starting to rise. And if we don't see that, then we're all doomed. Because as Greta says, there is no planet B. This is all we have as of right now. Technology is advancing. We have to do this. There is no question about it. And I would push any kind of alternative fuels that comes across my desk if I'm elected, okay? We have to do this. That's all there is to it, folks.
My top priority in addressing climate change would be tying it to green jobs. There is an immense market of potential economic boom and new jobs and new technologies for inventing for building solar panels or for building new cars. So what we need to do, the top priority, and this is how we, are able to sell climate change to the public or to the business community, is they're going to make a lot of money because the international community wants better, greener technology. They don't want fossil fuels. They don't want, catalytic converters and all of that stuff. They want to have a better environment. So what we can do is, if our top priority is, how can we make, basically what the American goal is, how do we make money out of this? We make money by creating, giving incentives for businesses to start up, to make more energy efficient, more greener products. We also then need to, once we have that and we've built in a stability, we can go back through and make sure that people understand why we're doing this. And as we're giving them jobs, we can give them the education on a greener environment. It's when you say to someone, here, you can no longer use a plastic straw, you have to use this cardboard straw, and you don't explain to them that the problem is that there's that fish are dying in the ocean because they're choking on straws. Or, we have turtles that are being found with pounds and pounds of plastic. If we can invent technologies that can solve these problems, and we can, we know we can. We sent someone to the moon. We can invent a way to make a straw better. So that's where we need to have our primary focus.
Thank you. What would you do to clean up and protect Ohio's lakes, rivers, and streams?
The first thing is we need to take back the EPA and take back it from the corporate raiders. I mean, they're basically corporate raiders. That's what they are. We need to have people who are scientists back in those positions, who care about the environment, who understand, and we need to hire, and we need to start making regulations and re-inputting regulations, and not just regulations, but making sure that they are codified into law, so that there's no question, you can't do an executive order and then take it away from the next president. We need to have those codified into law, where EPA protections of how much how much lead and things are going into the water streams, or how much chemicals. That's where we can focus, and we can build a bipartisan group of Ohioans, of Midwesterners, because these are issues that affect everyone. They're not partisan issues if you take it down to the base level. If you strip away the politics of it, nobody, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Socialist, Communist, Fascist, doesn't want their kids to drink bad water. They just don't. So we need to start talking about this in a way that people can understand, where it has a resonance in their life. So that's I think
Well, rolling back the clean water stuff that we see Trump trying to do now, cannot happen. We can't go backwards. I always talk about moving towards the future. We need to keep improving our water. Mercer County and Ohio State Extension are doing great works with Grand Lake St. Mary's. They're working with the farmers who didn't know that they were putting too much nitrogen into their soil. So communication, education between the parties that pull from that lake need to go on. The EPA needs to be like a standalone agency away from everybody else that has autonomy to say, we need to do this for the environment. And that's the way it should be. But we know it's a political entity. So the water cannot go backwards. We need to keep going. Flint, Michigan was a travesty. I know in Lima they're doing great things with their water supply because it was mandated. So be it. So we need to keep moving forward. But the lakes are essential. Marcy Kaptur is fighting for Lake Erie. because the snake on the lake. She's doing great things trying to get that lake, and it's, turned around. At the base of the Mississippi, there's dead zones of all the pesticides and chemicals flowing out of the Mississippi. There's dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. We need to clean that up. But education is the key to this. Educate the farmers using less pesticides and chemicals on our food too.
Okay, Jeff, what are your top legislative priorities in addressing gun safety and reduction of mass gun violence?
Well, first off, we all know that the Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the right to bear arms, although the interpretation of that is up to the scholars. The assault weapons ban that was allowed to expire needs to be reinstituted. An AK-47, a 7.62 millimeter round, and a AR-15, a 5.56 millimeter round. The AR-15 was designed, M16, was designed that the bullet would tumble through the body. It's not a traditional bullet where it goes straight through you. It tumbles through the body, tearing through the body. That is a military option. I should know because I was trained as military unit armor to fix those weapons. So I've fixed M60s, saws, M16s, 50 caliber machine guns. Those weapons should not be on the street. And my brother-in-law owns one, okay? But the assault weapons that are made for military needs to stay off the street. Gun violence in itself, there's like 36,000 people that were injured by gun violence last year. 98% of children 0 to 14 that encountered gun violence was here in the United States. 98%. We have to do something. We're going to meet stiff opposition from the other side. But we have to cut through that and get to, we are American. We have to protect each other. We can't have this gun violence. People will say, well, we're going to get it on the black market anyways. I'm not advocating for taking your guns away. I call that a boo thing. Boo, we're going to take your guns away. No, we need proper gun legislation, not gun control, legislation to help with this gun violence.
All right, thank you, Shannon.
My top priorities for addressing gun violence are we need to deal with the loopholes, closing the loopholes. Jordan wrote with Representative Massey an op-ed which was chock full of lies. But the main lie that they told in it was none of the proposals that the House had passed under H.R. 8 would have stopped gun violence. We know that's not true. Background checks would have stopped the Charleston shooter. That's why it's in fact called the Charleston loophole, because he was able to get a gun when he should not have got a gun. A few days after that was the Odessa shooting, where the guy got a gun through means where he shouldn't have gotten one. He was rejected, and then he still got it. We need to close the loopholes. Every gun sale and every gun transfer needs to be recorded. Everyone in this room is expected to have their car. When there's an accident, we're supposed to announce it. When you register your car, it's nothing that we're asking. The Second Amendment Act says basically that for a well-regulated militia being necessary for the safe protection of society, no one is safe in this society from gun violence at this point. People can be asleep in their beds and get shot. I support H.R. 8, which I said, so closing the loopholes, also closing the red flag laws and then the pink flag laws. Whereas if you have a boyfriend, like if I have a boyfriend and he assaults me and we break up, he can still get a gun. Whereas if we were married, he wouldn't be able to. There's so many little tiny loopholes that need to be stopped. And this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. If you look at the polling, 90% of Ohioans support background checks. It's 86% of white Republican males support universal background checks in Ohio.
All right, so what proposals would you make to secure our schools and protect
I think that what we need to do is we need to, from an early age, start talking about mental health. We need to talk about guns specifically, but we need to teach kids ways of dealing with their anger and their aggression, which doesn't go to violence first. And that's part of the mental health and the whole wellness situation that we were talking about earlier. All of these things are interconnected. We also need to have security systems in schools that don't make these kids feel like prisoners, but still keep them safe. There's a lot of talk about how they've started taking away cell phones from parents, or from kids when they're in classrooms. The problem with that is, sometimes if there's a school shooter, that's the last call that you get from your child. That's how 911 gets alerted, that there's something wrong. So we need ways that we can keep our kids safe, but that they're not feeling like they're in a prison, that they're not feeling like they've already done something wrong. When you walk in and you've got the metal detectors, and you can't wear you can't wear this and you can't wear that because it's going to be aggressive. We need to stop treating kids like they're going to be guilty, but we need to give them ways to handle their aggression and their mood swings. We didn't live in, it wasn't like this. We don't have to live like this because we didn't live like this for almost all of humanity. This is a modern problem that the NRA helped create because they wanted to sell some guns. When they stopped being a recreational organization that worked with hunters and stopped being the mouth of the gun manufacturers, all of these things started to spike. And that's where we need to stop. We need to stop the NRA's money is the first and most important thing to stop any gun safety.
Protecting our schools, one way is not to put more guns in the school. I don't see the logic in that. I know it's a gun-free zone, but there's other countermeasures that we can put in place. For example, Lima City Schools just put in place where they have devices on the inside of doors that can shut down that door, and a guy my size can't bust through it, can't shoot through it. Okay, those are countermeasures that we can put in place where people shelter in place. And now we have things like they're pulling fire alarms. So now kids are worried about fire alarms. We have to counter that somehow, some way. But the countermeasures you need to put in place are not putting more guns in there. Whether it be a sally port, where one door closes, the other one stays closed until that person is identified and okayed to enter the school. Most of the schools close all their doors and lock all the doors on the outside anyways. I think Bath Elementary School actually has special glass on their cafeteria, which is out front. And then they have shelter or shades that come down over it in an active shooter situation. So countermeasures need to happen to protect the kids rather than going after guns, because we know that's not going to happen. We mentioned the Odessa shooter. The Odessa shooter got it through a private person. Well, some of that stuff needs to hold that person accountable that sold them that weapon. If they get the weapon from their parents, the parents need to come into the question there where, why didn't you secure your weapon? And how did your child get that weapon to take it to school? But the trauma that is going on for the kids is just terrible out there. So again, we need to support, we need to issue money to secure the kids in their school when it happens.
All right, thank you. Okay, Jeff. In Ohio and throughout the nation, we have many children whose lives have been upended due to substance abuse by their parents or caregivers. What would you do to address the opioid crisis and the overall problems of substance abuse and addiction plaguing our communities?
Opioids hits very close to home for me. My brother-in-law's nephew was down for 14 hours on the floor. He has rapidity on the side of his leg, and he doesn't know if he's going to recover because of opioids. The opposite side was he got hooked on heroin, held up a bank. He didn't really have a good gun. He had a play toy. He went to jail for 4 years. Now the difference is Clay is his name. Clay, while on the inside, changed his life around. He is clean. He is becoming a counselor. We need more counselors, like we mentioned earlier. But border security with the fentanyl coming from China that we always hear about, whether it be, we always see it. I actually saw the drug dealers had a sub. You know, how do you countermeasure a sub rather than send a destroyer after it and depth charge it? But those are the things, we have to have the counseling. We can't punish people because they become addicts and send them to jail. That's counterproductive. I mean, that just leads to a life of crime and whatever else you can think of with that. We have to have counselors, more counselors to help these people. And that's what, you know, my cousin Clay is shooting for. He wants to become a counselor to help people like himself overcome these addictions. We can't, again, penalize these people for becoming addicts. I've heard stories where the baby changing stations in Walmart, they'll sprinkle the fentanyl on it and bam, you just come in contact or you're hooked. Is that my fault? Should I go to jail for that? Or should I get substance abuse counseling? And that's what I would shoot for, is get more counselors out there for the people that need it.
Thank you. Shannon?
The first thing is we need to treat substance abuse as another healthcare issue. It is. We also need to punish the dealers. You know, we talk about drug dealers and we have this image that, you know, they're like poor and they're black and whatever. These guys are rich white doctors and they are distributing them at a level to which we've never seen drugs distributed before. You know, the Washington Post went through by county in America. And you can look up Logan County, you can look up Bellefontaine County, and I think it's like something like 68 pills per person in Ohio were distributed at opioids. It's, you know, and so they're making hand over fist millions of dollars, and we're not prosecuting them the way that we would prosecute a guy selling, you know, a $10 bag of weed on the street. These guys are drug dealers. You know, just because they've got a doctor in front of their name and an MD at the end doesn't make them any better people. So we need to focus on the criminality where the criminality is. It's the manufacturers and the dispensers. We also need to treat the people who are suffering addiction as a disease. It is. We know that that's what it needs to be caused. So when we're dealing with mental illness and we're dealing with addiction, they need to be comprehensive within the healthcare system. We also need to make sure, though, that they're not being given medication that they can't sustain. So I don't know the answer to how you solve the problem. I don't think it's a one person, one's unique answer. It's going to have to be a comprehensive approach among an entire community of people, from healthcare providers to justice potential, you know, the law enforcement community, all of those working in concert together.
All right, and here's your next question. Do you support the decriminalization of marijuana?
Yes, I do. I don't. I lived in California for many years where it was decriminalized. It was made legal. It makes a big difference in people's lives. I mean, my dogs, for example, take CBD oil because they have arthritis, and it's a lot easier and a lot better than giving them the Medicam that's like $80 a bottle and is, you know, going to destroy their liver. So pot, I mean, we've put a bunch of people in jail for like $10 bags of pot who've destroyed their lives. It's ridiculous. So what we need to do is decriminalize it, tax it, and make it, and pull the people out of prison and, you know, give them either commute their sentences or pardon them and let them go on with their lives so that they're not criminals for something that a vast majority of people actually use and have made their lives better. I actually had a doctor tell me, my best gynecologist I've ever had was a gay man. He's like, honey, if you ever get cancer, I don't care what you have to do. If you have to buy it on the street, buy marijuana because it's the only thing that will help with chemotherapy. And that's, you know, it's true.
Amen.
Yes, I support decriminalization of marijuana. There's a lot more to, now that the science has come out, there's a lot more to marijuana than just smoking it to get high. There's a lot more to it that I don't think there's ever been a report of an overdose of smoking marijuana. So obviously I think it's probably safe. CBD oil, I've used it myself. I think we need to look at regulations for that because there's a lot of discrepancies in that. If you take some CBD oil, especially with my work, and there's THC in it, you're going to lose your job. They told us that just recently. So I think we need to regulate that industry without harming the effects of the CBD oil on the human body. There's also other things we can do with marijuana. Hemp is a fast-growing plant that could be used for paper, clothing. There's a whole host of things that we can do with marijuana as a plant, as a weed actually. So yes, I wholeheartedly believe that we should decriminalize marijuana.
All right, thank you. Would you support legislation that would ban for-profit prisons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I don't, you're talking about for-profit prisons. They don't care about the environment that the prisoners are in, even though they're there because they're bad people. But they're always worried about the bottom line. They don't worry about anything else. Living conditions, enough guards. Oh, we can't afford 4 guards, so we're only going to have 3, and then a riot happens, because you're low manning. So no, I think we should never let the prisons go to for-profit corporations. What do you think, sir?
I'm not gonna.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Shannon?
Yeah, I absolutely think we should ban for-profit prisons. What we know is that when the bottom line is the only thing that matters, services don't happen. We're not, part of prison should be punitive, obviously, for certain crimes, but it should also be a way that people can make their lives better. Some people just make a mistake, they get caught up in a bad situation, or they have a drug situation, like you were saying that your cousin, he went through there. Now he's learning to be better. He's learning a different way to function. And so we need to make sure that our prisons aren't just punitive warehouses where they're stacking people who we deem are unworthy of protections or unworthy of a second chance. We need to make them in a way that makes them, be more communal and more beneficial to society. One of the big areas where I hate private prisons is when we do juvenile crime, because they're running them like they're torture chambers. We've seen investigation after investigation after investigation come back and say, these kids are, being run at 6 in the morning to midnight or something. And they're not learning anything. They're not learning to be better. They're just learning to either be criminals or learning that society hates them, so why should they care? If no one's going to care for them, why should they care? And I think that that's where we need to deal with, it's also a place where we need to deal with mental health issues. Because a lot of people who are in prison have mental health issues, and that's affecting it. As I was saying earlier, it's a comprehensive approach that we need to take to these issues.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Okay, 1 in 6 Americans have food insecurity, and 1 in 5 children go hungry at some point in a year. What should Congress do about this?
We should fully fund school lunches and school breakfasts. When I was little, at times I was on school lunches and school breakfast, free lunches and free breakfasts at school. We know that sometimes that's the only time a kid gets a meal, a good healthy meal all day. We also need to make sure that those meals are healthy. When we're declaring ketchup as a vegetable, we've got huge issues. So what we need to do is make access to fresh and make the SNAP program work better. Make it so that you can get things like, Freshour vegetables and organic vegetables and things like that, or you can use it at a farmer's market. There are many, many ways that we can help people, and we can help our rural communities. It's all, again, interconnected. So what I would do is make sure that we're fully funding the government programs that feed kids, not cutting them like the current administration is trying to do, and making sure that we make the states also participate in them by penalizing them if they don't. If they want to, if Ohio, for example, wants to cut the amount of money that they're giving to child hunger programs, then they don't get, money from the government for it. So there's a lot that we can do, especially based on taxes and things like that, to handle food insecurity issues.
All right, thank you.
I agree with you. Free lunches, free breakfast should be in every school in America. But along with that, I think we should fund free lunches at least for the summer months. Because what happens to the children when they leave school for the year? They go back to being hungry. So I know in Lyman, and I speak a lot about Lyman because that's where I'm from, they do have some programs there where kids can come in and they don't just feed them, they have activities for them. So we need to fund those sort of things that last throughout the year, not just the school year. And again, organic food is great. I think it goes back to education of what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat. But funding those programs. I'm not sure about the punishment of if the state decides to cut those programs, that the federal level should cut those programs. I don't think that helps the child any, and we need to persuade the state that this is the right course of action of funding those programs. I think there's other ways to go about punishing the state, if you will, the state in other areas other than taking education dollars away or whatever it may be. But those people need that. And it all goes back to decent prices, regulated prices by the market from the farms, not corporate farms, to make food available, price conscious. I love that there's 97 cents a gallon milk out there now. So if you have kids at home, you go through like 5 gallons of milk in a week. So I think the schools are a good start, and then we need to move on to how we feed the homeless and all that stuff.
All right, thank you. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there is an average of $16,000 a year income disparity between men and women here in Logan County. What are some steps Congress could take to close the gap?
To be honest, I don't know if Congress can fill that gap. Equal rights, equal opportunity, we instituted years ago. We thought that would be a good thing. Me personally, as pie in the sky, you don't put any names, you don't put female, male. You look at the resume and you decide, is this person a good fit for the job? This is what I'm going to pay whoever fills that job. And to pay a woman less, I mean, if Shannon had the same knowledge as me in a job, she should get the same knowledge or same pay as me. I mean, I don't understand the disparity there, but I just feel if you have the same thing across the board, you should receive the same pay.
Janet?
I believe we should fully institute and implement the Lilly Ledbetter Equal Pay Act, which we're not doing. And it was enacted, but it's now with the Trump administration, it's being completely ignored. All of the administrative actions that have been taken to lessen the wage discrimination. And remember, I mean, and that 16,000 is only normally between white men and white women. If we're talking, black women, Hispanic women, it's significantly less than that. The wage gap is insane. I think Hispanic women on average make 54 cents of what a white male makes. We absolutely, and Congress absolutely can handle that. We can force companies to prove what their pay scales are, which was Obama had instituted that as an executive order, that you had to prove that you were paying your employees equally. That has been rescinded. We can codify that into law. We can make sure that industries where women are going into are not, then the money doesn't go down. There's actually been studies that show that if women sort of take over an industry, salaries go down in those industries as opposed to where they were when men were in. And so we absolutely can look at the research and we can institute policies that stop that and are absolutely punitive on corporations who pay women less. We also can stop the penalty for women who have children and who take time off from their work life to go and have a child. So those are just a few of the things that we can do.
All right, thank you. Okay, Shannon, given the increased stress of poverty, addiction, and health, how will you raise Title I and IDEA funding for schools in Logan County and the other counties in the 4th Congressional District?
Well, I think this is where a coalition building and becoming, friendly with other people, because you do need them to vote for your slice of the pie. So when, one of the problems with Jordan is he's so polarized over here that even the Republicans don't want to help him because they hate him too. So it's true. I mean, the people in this room hate Jordan, the people in the House caucus room hate him a whole lot more. Several of them have listed that's why they're leaving Congress, because they don't want to deal with him and they don't want to deal with the Freedom Caucus. So what we can do is make sure that, because what's happening in rural areas in Ohio are not dissimilar to what's happening in rural areas in Minnesota or rural areas in California. So when we focus together on building a coalition of rural communities, regardless of partisanship, we can actually start funding them. We can make sure that the IDEA funding, which is the Elementary Secondary Education Act, which, so there has to be a structure in place that we can work with Congress that takes away from the making it state funding only. And we need to make it there needs to be a federal mandate because people move around. I've lived in multiple states, many of you have lived in multiple states, and you've settled here. So if my education is different in here, or as it was when I grew up in Las Vegas, we have to have some sort of national standards. Not necessarily national testing, but national standards so that everybody's learning the same things so that communities, regardless of where we are, have the same ability to thrive.
Thank you.
Well, I could say, honestly, I'm not familiar with Title I or the IDEA, okay? I can say that honestly. I know schools, there's some legislation moving through Ohio by Bob Cupp from Allen County that has a different kind of formula for funding public schools. But I could say that I will have to decline to answer that one since my knowledge isn't right. So.
Okay, fair enough. He's honest about it. What's for honesty? Okay. What would you support to make students' higher education and trade school loan repayments more manageable? Should it be possible to refinance student loans for lower rates? And would you end the exemption of student loans for bankruptcy proceedings?
Well, I don't think we can end the bankruptcy mandate.
Well,
Because
just to be clear, right now, you cannot declare bankruptcy and stop payment on student loans. So that's
Correct.
what you're saying, you don't want that
Yeah,
to do.
because I think that will lead to an abuse of the system. I mean, with people going to school for like $200,000 and then they get out and it's like bam, bankruptcy. I don't think that's right, me personally. Okay. What I would like to see is a better, more robust system where we can get to a free education system. I mean, my daughter can come out of high school with 2 years of college. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump to 4 years, if they should choose it. But the trades are hurting, so why don't we offer something where we can get the trades involved, where they can get that education and not have to have this big ballooning bubble out there waiting, trillions of dollars waiting for it to collapse, and then what are we gonna do? How much more could we pump into the economy with a blink of an eye if we just forgave all of the student loans out there? How much? I pay $237, but that's just me. I don't know what Shannon pays, but that's just me. How much could we just say, okay, we need to redo this, and bam, everybody's forgiven, goes against the bankruptcy, and throws all this trillions of dollars into the economy, and all these young students out there have a new lease on life, versus I'm gonna be paying for my debt until I die, probably. And I've only got about $35,000. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could probably get it down by 65. But, a lot of students out there, $200,000, $300,000, they'll be paying forever to get out from underneath it. So I think we need to get to that free education center that everybody hears.
All right,
Hi,
Shannon.
I'm Shannon, and I have $237,000 worth of student loan debt. Nice to meet you all. How are you doing? Yeah, no, it's scary. I literally got my notice today from the people going, yeah, your student loan bills, or your student loan due date is next week or something. And I was like, okay, good to know. Heads up. I think that there are times where you should be allowed to declare bankruptcy at your student loans. You absolutely should. I mean, there are times when, it's so overwhelming. For me, it's completely impacted everything in my life. I wanted to work in Washington. I wanted to do policy. I wanted to work for a nonprofit. With $237,000, you know what you don't do? Work for a nonprofit, because they don't have the money. So I had to go and work in the law. And I loved it. I had a great time. I was able to help clients, and I was able to work on, help them find justice. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I look at people, I look at my nieces, I look at every kid I've ever known, including, and I will tell your daughter this, get as much free education for college as you can get. If you can go to a community college, take the 2 years and go to a community college. Don't do what I do, which went to 4 years undergrad and 2 years of master's program. I loved my college. I absolutely adored it. But it is financially nearly impossible to survive that. I don't have a house. I don't have, all of these things, because I have $200,000. I have a mortgage on 2 pieces of paper that hang on my wall. And so we need to find a way. This is, like, when I talk to voters, this is the top 3 things in order are, that I get questions on, are healthcare reform, guns, and student loan debt, / will you wear a jacket because Jordan doesn't. Those are all the questions I get. And let me tell you, I've discovered one very important thing with running for office. There are no unfunny Jim Jordan jacket jokes. They're all funny.
All right, thank you. Okay, so what legislation should Congress pass to address our broken immigration system?
Oh, that's an easy question. I've looked at a lot of these policies and things. Like the Gang of 8 bill in 2008, I think was really our best chance to do it, and certain people decided not to help us with that. I actually really like Will Hurd, who's a Republican from Texas. He's the only Republican on the border. And he had a very, very good policy of sort of strengthening the borders in ways that we make sure that we aren't allowing criminals in, but not draconian where we're putting babies in cages. There was a woman today on Twitter who said, that Kobach was talking about how, they're only arresting criminals. And she's like, my 9-year-old client was walking to school when ICE picked her up, and now she's in a baby jail. They took away her backpack. She wasn't a criminal, she wasn't a gang member. She was a 9-year-old girl who was going to school. We need to at first remember that there are people at stake in this. And that is so lost because we're dealing with, they're criminals or they're this. They're not. They're people. And they're, a lot of them are children. We need to come to a way of allowing dreamers to become citizens. They are the best and brightest. Immigrants in this country are what drive the economy of this country. First generation and second generation are by far the most economically they throw the most into the economy. They're the ones who start businesses. I mean, look at Google. Google was started by a couple of immigrants. That's where the American dream is. People want to come here and they want to succeed. So they do. And that's what, I mean, so that's what we need to do. And I would honestly have you all look at Will Hurt's proposal, which I think is probably the best out there.
All right, thank you.
Well, there's tons of legislation on the books already for immigration. Okay, one thing that we don't do is throw trillions of dollars at a useless wall. The human spirit will find a way around it, over it, cut it down, tunnel it under it. It's a waste of money. That money could be better spent with better technology on the border to view into trucks, like I saw one time that they x-rayed this truck and there's people inside the walls. Better technology on the border, okay? More border guards to help police that humongous border down there. But we forget, who's coming in on the north side of our border? We're all worried about the south side. What about the north side? What about the ports? What about the submarine, coming in? We need to do that. And I lost my train of thought. But I mean, it's just, we can't demonize the immigrants. The place down in Mississippi that they found 650 people. What about a program that we have if they're caught, if they have a job, if they're paying taxes, if they don't have a criminal record, put them into a process to become a legal immigrant. Not snatch them up and send them away. Don't have a job, got a criminal record, so long. Come back when you straighten yourself out. I agree with that. And that's what should happen. We should not raid a place in the middle of the day and their kids come home and no mom and dad. And they're crying, wondering where they are. So let's pass legislation that offers a path to legal immigrant status in the United States. And trust me, there's a lot of companies out there that have illegal immigrants working for them, including some of the Koch brothers.
Okay, if elected, how will you deal with voter suppression to ensure fair elections?
I don't think we can do, we have to revamp the whole purge that's going on. I think that's kind of the Republican thing of trying to get some of the voters off, because let's face it, Democrats are not the crowd that comes out every election and shows up in force, and traditionally it's been like 30%. There's precincts in Lima, Ohio, it's like 20%. So that purge, I think, has to be revamped. Gerrymandering, we all know what happened with the gerrymandering. That has to go away. It should be a bipartisan panel that decides who's going to be in what district, and not be decided by one party. That is just not right.
Thank you, Shannon.
As part of HR1, which is the House's plan it basically takes all of the voter. It takes voter suppression, gerrymandering, corporate money, dark money, and election security all in one. It sort of tries to make it all, because they're all seamlessly connected. Voter suppression, the key thing with that is that we need to codify the Voting Rights Act. When the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, what they did was so much more insidious than just strike it down, because they struck down the heart of it, but the Voting Rights Act is still the law of the land. There's just no way that you can now quantify who is being discriminated against. Now, we know that 300,000 people in Wisconsin, for example, were stricken from the rolls. Most of them were Democrats and most of them were minorities. Same thing in Michigan, same thing in Pennsylvania. Odd how those three states weren't so effective in shocking. But what we need to do is make sure that we, as Democrats, fight for every election. We also need to make sure that we have every registered voter. Now, I know that you deal with a lot with Lima, but Lima has the largest population of African Americans in Ohio who are not registered to vote. And we need to make sure that we're getting everybody every vote we can get. Because it's not like the Republicans have a lot of support. They just have a lot of voters versus what the Democrats have. So one of the ways that we can fight voter suppression is getting a lot of people to vote, who then can vote to make sure that the people that we elect will support anti-voter suppression efforts.
All right, thank you. What do you see as the role for Congress in protecting our elections from foreign interference and cyber attacks?
Should be Congress's #1 goal is to protect our elections. And that's when you are a member of Congress, you swear an oath to protect and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what you do. That's what you're told to do. That's the whole job. So in protecting democracy, we need to make sure that we are strengthening the Congress has allocated $380 million to the states to upgrade their systems because we know that the Russians hacked every state. Every state got hacked in the Russian. A lot of times they were able to access the voter files. Now we know this because the Republican chair of the Senate Intel Committee came out and said it. So it's not a partisan issue. There are many Republicans who are terrified about this. Now we've got a few in the White House who aren't so much, but and one who represents us. But so what we need to do as a Congress needs to strengthen and pass H.R. 1, which has the support of the intelligence community because they've looked at, and I know in Logan or in Union County they took part of Ohio State got their money, their portion of the 380, and they bought new voting machines. Our voting machines in Logan County, and I know several other counties, I don't know if Logan has it, but I know in Union we have it, where they're completely air-gapped, which means they're never on the internet, but they're computerized, but there's a ticket so that there's an actual paper ballot that can go back and be counted. We need to be able to count the tally on a paper ballot that cannot be hacked.
All right, thank you.
The counties I've been in, up north and things like that, I think a lot of them are moving towards that system that you just described. So that's a good step in that direction. I think Congress should make it perfectly clear to everyone that foreign interference in our elections should be like a felony offense, punishable by throwing your butt in jail. Don't go out on the lawn outside the White House and ask a foreign nation to dig up dirt and then have the gall of Jim Jordan to go on TV and say, oh, it was a joke. It's crazy. We should never allow, if I had a Russian come up to me and say, hey, I got dirt on Shannon, I'd tell him to get lost and then report him to the FBI. That's what should happen. We should not ever take anything from a foreign government to interfere with our elections. I'm sorry, it's not right, it shouldn't be done. They're not American.
How would you address Citizens United, and how would you curtail the power of lobbyists in Washington?
I can't say what I just thought. Citizens United was a humongous step backwards for America. It allowed black money into our elections. It allowed corporations into our election. Last time I checked, corporations want a person that was born in America. They're representing people that work for them. How is that American? So I would somehow ban, I don't know how we would go about doing this, of overturning Citizens United, whether it be a amendment, I can't remember the folks up north that are trying to get an amendment to overturn this very subject, but that's going to require 2/3 of the states to get that overturned. Lobbyists, I've never seen it myself. I've heard horror stories where the lobbyists hire homeless to sit in lines at House members' doors so they can get access to them. I mean, that's just crazy in itself. I don't know. I hope that's not right. But lobbyists should never be allowed into our halls of Congress. I mean, that is corruption at its worst. We can talk. We can talk to you. I can talk to whoever. Don't ever expect any kind of favor from me. If you give me some money, don't expect any kind of favor from me. That is not who I am. So if a lobbyist comes up to me, we can talk. Don't expect me to vote your way. Never. I will never do that.
Shannon?
I take a somewhat different view because lobbying is enshrined in the First Amendment. It's the right to petition the government for the redress of grievances. That's where lobbying comes from. Now, we talk about lobbyists and we always do it in a negative context. But remember, like Moms Demand Action, they're lobbyists. You know, if you support, you know, mental health or Alzheimer's research and you contact your congressperson, you're lobbying. And you're oftentimes doing it as part of a larger group that's organizing it who have paid lobbyists. Now, we do need to get dark money out, and there needs to be regulations. Now, part of what the House has come up with is banning members from ever being able to lobby, or former members to ever be able to lobby. And I think that that's a good idea. Now, the problem that I have, again, with that is what happens if, for example, Gabby Giffords couldn't lobby Congress now for her organization, which is for gun safety, because she got shot while doing her job. So we need to be very careful of how we do this in context of protecting the constitutional rights of people. And then there was the other half of Citizens United. We absolutely need to overturn Citizens United, and the only way that we can do that at this point is either completely get a new Supreme Court and have it relitigated, or a constitutional amendment. Neither one of those is a particularly easy concept, and every time that they fight for this, the corporations who have way more money fight against it. So and there's sort of the problem with it all. But we have to be careful of how we define lobbyists as always negative, because they're not necessarily. We're all lobbyists to our own issues.
I'm going to stop here with the questions. I neglected to let each one of these candidates introduce themselves at the beginning.
That's fine.
Sorry.
It's a whole lot easier, actually.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little bit of extra time at the end for your closing remarks. And Jeff, you get to decide whether you're going to go first or second.
I'm fine with it.
I'll let her go first.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we give her 3 minutes?
Well, I was going to tell you who I was, but you know,
Okay.
we've covered that a little bit.
Okay.
And I would just want to thank you all for coming out and for participating in the democratic process. This is how we change. This is, you know, people showing up on a Saturday afternoon to hear candidates who are in tough fights are how we make change. So thank you all for showing up. And thank you all for, you know, being willing to participate and to fight for all, you know, with all of us. You know, Jeff and I have already agreed that we'll support each other no matter who the nominee is. And so we want you to make sure that you all do that as well. Like, I know, like, my family's here, and, you know, my mom can vote in this district. So if I'm not the nominee, I still expect her to vote for Jeff. And I would imagine that Jeff would expect that of his supporters. So we want to make sure that this isn't an ugly fight, you know. I mean, I think that we can have a series of policy discussions, and it doesn't have to be negative. So I want to thank you all for that. I want you all to hold us to that. You know, if you see us acting up, you know, be like, hey, you made a promise not to do that. So that's where I think that, I know I'm not going to waste 3 minutes, but that's really kind of where I wanted to close with.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to use 3 minutes either. So. But I agree with Shannon. We are part of the same system, and we shouldn't be arguing amongst ourselves. It's up to us to convince you and to give you the facts, give you our personality, and say to you, I want your vote. Okay? I'm going to leave with, there's 2 sayings that I have. Maybe I might go over 3. Albert Einstein said, the world will not be destroyed by evil. It will be destroyed by those who stand and watch and do nothing. Okay? that is the voting power. So we need to go home, look at our families, look at our coworkers, look at our neighbors, and ask ourselves, are we going to change tomorrow? Will we be any better 2 years from now with Jim Jordan? Will, in 4 years, will he finally buy a jacket to wear?
They're never unfunny.
Sorry, I had to go there. So we have to ask ourselves, is it time now to vote for someone in our district? Jim Jordan's been out of our district. He was in state before, so I don't know how much time he spends in our district, because it's a mystery. So we need to vote for someone that's in our district, on the ground, constantly for years. Okay? So let's ask ourselves, are we going to be better off in 2 or 4 years? Okay? Thank you all for coming. Chairman Adam, thank you. Barbara Jo, you did a great job. And Janet, awesome. Thank you.
I just want to put in a little plug here for the Logan County Democrats have a website. If you want to go there, you can find out what's going on. I also want to let you know that even though I'm not running for office, I am still in this fight. We have a website called the Jordan Watch. We are trying to bring word out, so if you want to friend us on Facebook, we put out information about his shenanigans on a pretty regular basis. And we are still trying to collect money from around the country. I also want to tell you that I wrote a book about my run for office, my 6 years that I spent running against Jim Jordan, and it was a lot of fun tearing him to shreds. It's not published yet, but I'll let you know when it is. And thank you very much for being here on a Saturday afternoon, and thank you to these brave candidates, because I know what you're going through, and this is rough. You know, sitting up here on this stage for 2 hours answering questions is rough, and you know, trying to get to all the meetings in 14 counties, it's a really onerous job. So I think we owe them a huge round of applause.
As well for everybody that came today in the audience and the candidates, and Ms. Garrett for coming and moderating. Really appreciate everyone's time and the effort that our crew of Democrats putting this on as well. So I really appreciate the hard work that these folks have done. I just wanted to share the success we've seen since March 2016, when the first meeting that I became chairman at, we had, I think, maybe 6 Democrats in the room. And so because of the effort of putting together our central committee and having the 2016 volunteers for the Clinton campaign that really stepped up and taking charge of the local Democratic Party, we've been able to have events like this here locally. And so we really appreciate all the work that our volunteers have